you all have been asking me a lot of questions on Instagram, and I used to have the series Conversations with Fashionista Professor during my early YouTube live, and you all had a lot of questions about that. And so because I was busy and there were things going on, I did not continue with the series. But I'm now ready to start a new series that talks about my experiences as a professor in a Southern university. I actually gave a TEDx talk about that, you know, something along those lines, but I did not talk about the racial issues and the microaggressions that I have experienced since coming to America and since being in academia. So the thing is, if you have been with me on all my channels, you know, I believe I started Fashionista Professor in 2019 and the Dr. Chistic Fashion Show in 2021 or thereabouts. The impetus for starting my Fashionista Professor channel was because of a lot of the stress and microaggressions that I was facing at my university, and so I needed an outlet to help me cope with the stress, sort of like a means of, you know, letting out all the bad energy. And since I've always liked fashion, if you all remember from my other series, I wanted to be a model when I was finishing high school, because I had an agent approach me, but my West African parents did not want me to go that route. They wanted me to go into the medical program. So I did go into the medical program at the age of 15 and ended up specializing in parasitology and entomology. And I graduated at the age of 19. You know, married my ex-husband, who is an American professor, an astrophysicist, and he brought me to Tennessee, and I've been here since, even after giving birth to 3 sons that are now adults. So the way I'm gonna do this series, I'm gonna talk a little bit about my background, my academic background, which I've just given you all a summary of. And then I'm gonna talk about, you know, my life here, working in America, and some of the positions that I've had in America that subsequently led to my position at my current university, where I have been a professor. I'm actually now a tenured professor for the past 20 years. And so I think the background is necessary to sort of, you know, give you an idea of some sort of the issues that I'm grappling with regards to the discrimination and retaliation that I have been experiencing at my university, you know, since I started working there, and subsequently since I filed a complaint against the university, and subsequently ended up suing my university. So this is just to let you all know that this is the introduction to the series, and I will be having a series every week, once a week. And so I hope you all will tune in for the series. And I'm also in talks with my mom and dad about doing a smaller series about their life growing up in West Africa. And because, you know, my parents always told me these stories, and I thought it would be something that would be beautiful for my children and hopefully, you know, other later generations to hear about, because it sort of gives them an insight to where I'm coming from. My youngest son usually tells me, "Mommy, I don't subscribe to your overachieving West African lifestyle," because when my kids were young, I really used to push them academically, and so sometimes my youngest son will be like, "Okay, Mom, I don't subscribe to your West African academic lifestyle." But anyway, knowing a little bit about, my background and, how the background of my parents was sort of give an anthropological background to what makes me me, the fashionista professor or the touchistic. And so as I go through the series, if you all have questions or specific questions for me, just ask the questions in the comments, or you can message me on Instagram or on TikTok, and I will be happy to go ahead and answer some of your questions in a vlog, such that we have that conversation about backgrounds, about experiencing racism, especially at a state university, and about the remedies for racism. Because people say to me, I do have people, when I talk to my friends, I'm not YouTube, because I've been very close-mouthed about that particular aspect of my life. So when I talk to my friends, especially when some of the recent issues started, my friends will be like, oh la la, why don't you sue? People think it's easy to sue in America, but it is a totally different ballgame. First of all, it's very difficult to find an attorney that will take an employment law case. And secondly, there are so many barriers to suing, especially if you're a professor. But I am gonna get into all that during the subsequent parts of the series. But first of all, I will start with the introduction of my background in Africa, which I've mentioned briefly, and segueing to my time in America. So after I got married and I got pregnant and had my oldest son, and I did not want to stay at home because I was lonely. I didn't really have friends. I had just come from West Africa to America. I was 20 when my oldest was born. And so I decided that it would be a good idea to go ahead and look for a job. My ex-husband is a professor, and so he was doing a research professor and an astrophysicist. And so he was doing well, and he told me that I did not need to work. But after 6 months with my oldest at home, with no friends, not knowing anybody, I was going stir crazy, so I needed to be out in the workforce such that I could talk to people. I could have adults I could talk to during the day. So I was at home after the birth of my first son for 6 months, and then I decided to go and look for a job. So the first job that I actually looked for after having my first son was, I had seen an announcement for a position at Vanderbilt. I think it was in the newspaper back then, they had newspaper job openings and stuff like that. So I decided that I was gonna go and actually go in person and pick up an application form and apply. Well, since I was a stay-at-home mom, for the first 6 months of my oldest son's life, I did not have a babysitter. So I decided I was going to take my son with me to just go ahead and pick up the application form. So I went with him to Vanderbilt, and I happened to find parking right next to the Acre building of Vanderbilt. The Acre building, downstairs you have the VA back then. So I parked and I went into the first floor, and they told me it was VA, and that it was, if I was looking for Vanderbilt, I should go up. So I went to the second floor, and as I was walking, I saw this gentleman in a white lab coat, and he was about to turn left into an office. So I was like, excuse me, do you know how I can get to human resources? And he stopped and he turned to me and he was like, hi, where exactly do you want to go to? I said, I'm looking for human resources, and he wanted to know, you know, if I had an appointment or something like that. And I told him that I wanted to go because I wanted to pick up an application for a job. And so we got into conversation. You know, it was very interesting. You know, he started talking to me about my background. You know, he wanted to know what my degrees were in, my research background. And we actually had a good conversation. We talked for almost 2 hours, right there and there, with my baby in the stroller. And during the course of the conversation, it came out that I had worked for World Health Organization under the auspices of Arbovirus and Vectors Research Division when I was at the university. It was part of the program, of the parasitology program. So I was 17 when I was working for World Health for the Arbovirus and Vectors Research Division back in West Africa, in Nigeria specifically. And I was coordinating the outbreak research and training. So basically, when you have infectious diseases like Dracunculus medinensis, which is colloquially called guinea worm, and is prevalent in some parts of Africa. You know, part of my job was to coordinate the training. So, you know, you meet with the local people and let them know the processes that involve transmission of the guinea worm. And so if you Google guinea worm, you see that, you know, you get infected when you get into water that has the organism. And so if you drink the water without boiling it, or you go into the water with an open sore, you can get infected, and when the worm matures, it starts coming out of the skin. And usually locusts, when the worm comes out of the skin, they sort of roll it on a mat. And if you're rolling it and it breaks up, the worm will go inside the skin and there will be abscess. And it's a very disfiguring infection. And so, you know, I had to talk to, you know, local people about ways of preventing such. I worked with local people on ways of preventing trypanosomiasis, which is caused by the tsetse fly, or some people call it tsetse fly. That's what we call it, at least that's my pronunciation of it. And so trypanosomiasis is what you know colloquially as sleeping sickness. And I remember there was a movie, The Rain Man, that talked about sleeping sickness. That's not what sleeping sickness that is caused by trypanosomiasis is all about. And so, you know, we will go to do field work and catch some samples to test them to see whether they were infected. And you also work with villagers to explain to them the transmission circle so as to prevent transmission of that. So, I mean, I was within the infectious disease section, and it was very, very insightful, very educational. And then, so when I went to, when I was stopped by the gentleman who happened to be the chair of dermatology back then at Vanderbilt. I didn't know that when he stopped me, I just knew that he was in a lab coat. And that was in the 90s. And after a long conversation, he was like, I would like you to work for me. When can you start? I was shocked because I did not know that you could get a job like that in America. Remember, I had, you know, it had been just a short while that I had come to America, then gave birth to my baby, and then stayed at home for 6 months. So I was not aware that people could get jobs like that. And so I was taken aback. So I told him that I was going to think about it, and I was gonna get his phone number, and I'll call him back to let him know if I was interested and when I will start. So, of course, after he offered me the position, I did not feel like going to human resources. So I went with my son downstairs and got into my car and went home. And I told my then ex-husband, and he was like, yeah, it is a legitimate offer. Vanderbilt is a very good school, and you should accept it if you're interested in it. So yeah, I eventually accepted the position, and I worked within that position for about 4 or 5 years. And I worked on research. I used to do lab research, invasion assays, where you invade cells that were cancerous, that had cancer. So you get a sample from individuals that had cancer, and then you do invasion assays trying to find what can actually inhibit the cancer cells in a nutshell in the Petri dish in the lab. And I also carried out enzyme-linked immunosorbent assays, which you use for running tests. Actually they can use it now for detecting COVID and stuff like that. So that was my time there at Vanderbilt, and that was one of the best work experiences that I had ever experienced in my time in America. The director was very respectful. We used to joke a lot. I thought of him as my mentor, and he would tell you when you're doing your experiments right, and he would commend you for that. And I tried in such a place, despite the fact that I was the only African American in his research area. I mean, he had other researchers that were other doctors that were from China or Japan or Americans. So that was a very good experience. But then I thought to myself that I did not want to be doing research, because when you talk about the lab conditions, they have to be clean and sterile, and you work when you're growing culture cells, you work under a hood. I'll try to see if I can find a picture of someone working under a hood and post it here. So you work under a hood, and I love to interact with people. And so when you are in a research lab and you're working on experiments, you're by yourself, you can't really talk. And remember, I was about 20 years old when I started. And so I didn't know that I wanted to do that, till I retired. I was like, And I've always liked fashion. And I would dress up to go to the university, and I would come in, and the secretary would, I would have to put on my lab, my lab coat to go into the lab to do my research. And then when I saw patients to get samples, my secretary would be like, you have to button up, because, I loved my mini skirts and leggings and stuff like that. So after about 4 years, when I was pregnant with my son, I had my son, and I actually got a promotion, and the director, he's actually a dermatologist. He has his MD and PhD, so he's a very bright guy. He's still in practice, but he's much older now, and he's about to retire. And I got, my family and I got so close to him that he will attend my older son's, birthday parties with his wife, and I met the kids, and, we visited them at their home and stuff like that. So I am gonna stop here, because I don't want this vlog to be too long, and we can continue. So what I'm trying to do with recounting of my earlier life in America is to sort of give the introduction as to how I segued and eventually got into my job at my current university where I have been for 20 years, and the issues that I have with racism or discrimination and retaliation. So I'm going to sign off now, and I look forward to seeing you all next week, and I hope you all enjoy this series because I'm interested and I'm excited about doing it. I'm also currently working on my 4th book about my experiences, especially my experiences at my current university and the lawsuit, one of the lawsuits that I have with my current university. So till then, I hope you all enjoy this series, and I hope you enjoy this introduction. You all take care. You all try to find your happy place. Kiss.